Hi, I'm Sahana.
I'm Meghana.
And this is Shankari, our co-host and co-producer. Today we're going to be discussing the book Wari by Linthoi Chanu. Do you want to give us a little bit more information, Meghana?
Sure, of course. So this book, Wari, that Sahana mentioned, it's a collection of 8 short stories revolving around Manipur. These stories are, I will read them out loud. Near Immortal, The Hound, When in War, Amity and Q, Hags of Mountain, Forbidden Passion, The Scarlet Harpy, and Floating Dreams. And these stories are all revolve around themes of Manipur's history, its geography, the cultural beliefs, and the society there, as well as the deep companionship that flows between citizens there. So, in my opinion, this book was really amazing, just because it's so rare that we find books, at least here, that actually discuss this
Indian
kind of
culture with this kind of nuance and specifically Manipuri culture with this kind of detail and cultural perspective.
Exactly.
It's really a very unique book, and it's definitely giving you perspectives into things you've never seen before, which kind of brings us to our first point. It gives you a lot of information on historical and cultural values, and there's also a bunch of terms you've never seen before. And really helpfully in this book, whenever they use a word specific to the language, they'll include it in the back of the book in a short little glossary, so you're able to understand what these mean and also learn the meanings of these new words that you might not have known before. I found that really nice. Mm-hmm. And then in front of that, there's all of these cultural and historical ideas that I've never encountered before, probably because I have a really Western-centric view of the world because of just how I've grown up. And when trying to grow out of it, this book has been really helpful because it's these views that I haven't seen before.
Exactly. It really illuminates you towards this rich, unique culture that I have personally never got a chance to learn about and experience.
Yeah, for example, in the last story in this book, Floating Dreams, they mentioned these fundi, which are basically in the lake. There are these small islands, right, where people live, and that I've never even thought about visualizing that, but that's so interesting, right? You know?
Yeah.
And also they talk about historically there was Japanese presence within the area, right? And there was that Japanese presence was in the wake of World War II. It was during the time of World War II, so that also had a massive cultural impact on Manipur as well.
Yeah, talking more about that, the Japanese occupation and the war there. That story in particular was very beautiful to me. The story that Sahana's talking about, it concerned a man from Manipur who basically found a soldier. It's kind of comedic. He's going to the bathroom and the soldier kind of just walks in on him and he gets so scared that he throws the bucket at his face and knocks him out.
Yeah.
But he ends up taking care of the soldier and nursing him back to health and feeding him. And the Japanese soldier is very grateful. And he always sings this lullaby when he's staying with the Manipuri man. And eventually it gets to a point where the soldier leaves behind a sword for the Manipuri man to keep, as kind of saying thank you. I didn't even speak the same language as you, and yet we are here sharing some sort of companionship.
Yeah.
And the Manipuri man, when he is older and he's with his kids, his kids are remember, he's going to sleep now, so you gotta sing the one lullaby that he really, really likes, which is actually the lullaby that the Japanese man would sing out loud when he was with him staying in the house. And you can see that the sword is actually passed from generation to generation in the family.
Yeah, so it's this cultural heritage as well. The second point I wanted to bring up relating to that is just the companionship within this book. It's there's these themes of helping the people around you, or trusting the people around you to help you, right? There's this one story in the book where a bunch of elders advise this man, it's the Scarlet Harpy. A bunch of elders will advise the father in the book to not buy this piece of land because they're it will bad things will happen if you build a house on this land. And he's I trust your advice, but I need to buy this land because it's the only land I can afford. So he buys it anyways. And
and for reference, the land that he's buying, it's actually a very sacred piece of land where this kind of guardian deity rests on.
Yeah, because in the culture, it's if there are water bodies,
which the land is next to.
Yeah, which the land has a lake on it. So if there's a water body, there are often deities or spirits resting inside of those bodies, which have to be like you have to deal with them carefully, because otherwise if you anger them, bad things might happen. So it kind of follows this child being spirited away, and she's like missing for 2 days, and she goes through this series of adventures, and when she comes back, her father decides to like build a shrine on the lake in order to make it safe for his kids. Like he he listens to the advice of other people, and there's just these themes of like, oh, like helping people because just because out of companionship.
I think another story that highlights that that I wanted to discuss was called, it was a one that was Amity and Q. So Amity and Q, the story was about like two women who are standing in line. So it talked about like in how in Manipur there's like a military presence there, because like in order to like, it doesn't specify why, but there's like a very strong military presence there, and so they have to stand in line with the military president in order to get like these basic resources like
Yeah,
gas
and then
like water and other things.
it's because at that point in time, the author explains that like food was like rationed out to the people.
Yeah.
So then, in order to get things like gas, you would have to stand in really long lines all the way from like before the sun even rose, because then only you'd be able to get your hands on even a little bit. So it continue.
Yeah, so basically in this story, there's like these two women and they're talking to each other, and it kind of, they have like this such a loving conversation where it's like, oh, you bring your nephew to my house to eat, and the other woman's like, no, 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 I can't do that, that's like too much work for you, right? And it's kind of like against this like harsh military backdrop of like these people just waiting in line to get like basic resources. It's kind of like this small, like very kind conversation between two people,
Two strangers.
yeah, and that connection is strengthened so much between these two people who like seemingly know nothing about each other but everything at the same time. And at the end of the story, when like one woman is like dragged away or like pushed away by saying like there's none left, the other woman is like seen reaching out for her, like grab my hand, like I'll take you. And it's kind of like that connection between people. You can kind of see that that's what's causing this society to survive.
Yeah,
like just like this friendship and this connection.
And then there's our third point, which is that there's so many like cool folk tales and like cultural beliefs in the story, and it's genuinely so unique and so interesting to read about. So the first story kind of freaked me out there, okay? It's about this like old woman, and she's really old, okay? She's really, really old. And there's this type of spirit, and it's called a koidowa, and that spirit is this type of black magic, and she uses it in order to stay alive. It's this like spirit that's connected to her navel that sucks the life force out of young people and gives it to her so she can live for longer. And it's so scary because like at the end of the story, right? There's this doctor who visits her in order.
It's her like distantly related grandson.
It's her distantly related like great grandson or whatever, and he's like he doesn't believe in any of this like magic or anything, and she has not been eating for a week. That's why he's come to visit her, because he's like, what's wrong, like are you feeling okay?
And he generally cares about her,
And he's being very kind to her, and she's like, I hope you live a long life or whatever, right? And you think that she's changed her ways, but then the story ends with like, oh wait, there was like a doctor who committed suicide, so you know that she was the one who like sucked out his youth. And like there's this really unique juxtaposition of like cultural traditions along with like semi-modern like settings, and that juxtaposition is something I've personally never seen before, and I found really fun and interesting to read about, even if it was a little scary sometimes. And you can see these other like folk tales and
I didn't so yeah, one of these folk tales was particularly interesting. It was called The Hound. So the Hound was talking about this guy in a pretty desolate condition, in that like he is like the sole breadwinner for his family, and he's trying to like support his mother and his sister. His dad is really not helping the situation and like spends all the money that he earns, and he's like yearns for like this kind of better life. And why do he thinks like everything is over, and like he like quit, like he just leaves the house in like kind of this rage
because like these people have come into his house and they're like, your father owes us money, and he's like, we don't have any money to give you. They decide to take the ducks that he's been raising, who don't belong to his father, who he's been raising with his own hard work. They decide to just take all of them away, and he's just so distraught about this.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's when he's out in the streets, and this like dog is kind of like with him, and no matter how many times he tries to tell the dog to shoo away, it like sticks with him. And like later in the story, we see that like there's this thing called like Lam Konba Lai, or like guardian deities, which were actually a part of like the Meitei faith, which was practiced by a community in like Manipur. And every clan in like the Meitei community has a sort of guardian deity. And the guardian of deity of the guy's clan in the story is like a dog or a hound. So it's like kind of like showing that even if times get really desperate and desolate, like this guardian deity is with you and will stay with you. And I really like that imagery of like this hound or dog like staying with him and providing him the belief that he needed to say, all right, like the situation sucks right now, but I need to keep going.
Yeah.
Not just this. So this was one story in particular that was super interesting. And then the next one was a little bit lighter. It's called Hags of the Mountain. Hags of Mountain was lighter because it was about like this European scientist professor guy who was visiting Manipur, and he kind of takes like this trek through like the forest, right? And at the end, he's like confronted by this like creature who he doesn't know if it's like a mythical beast or if it's just like a animal in the forest. But the author reveals near the end, she provides like a little bit of like a Linthoi Chanu, she, like near the end of her story, like she kind of provides this context for like the whole monster thing that he saw in the forest. In the story, they discuss these like creatures called Laudrobi. Laudrobi are like creatures that they're deep forest dwellers, and they kind of like kidnap these men and hunters, and they hold them as like their captive husbands, and then they kind of like make scratches in the feet so that they can't get away. And so then it's like this really creepy story, and like of the Laudrobi, like these beasts that you don't really want them to get their hands on you, but it's actually based on like these slow loris, which is like this little creature that lives in like the forest of Manipur. And it's kind of like the story was thought to like warn people of like the slow loris's like toxic bite, to kind of like warn people to stay away from them. So I thought that was really cool that like this folktale that like we see as like, oh my gosh, it's like so scary. It's actually just to warn people like stay away from this animal.
Yeah, it feels like the sort of thing like you tell people just so like it's just like a warning, maybe something you tell to like a younger child or something, just to like keep them out. So overall, I just really think that this book provides a super unique perspective on like Manipuri culture, and just like Linthoi Chanu has really done something here that I've never really seen before. So I really, really appreciated the value of this book, and I really hope that more books like this one can be published in the future.
Yeah.
So we can see like more about these different communities within what we think of as the Indian monolith. We can see these like really specific communities and how they practice their culture, and how diverse India really is. So really enjoyed this book. And
two things before we
recommend
close out. Yeah. So in this book, I think like two things that I just wanted to highlight that were like particularly impactful was just the story like Forbidden Passion talks about like how drug use and drug abuse has affected Manipur through the eyes of like a girl who sees her brother succumb to drug abuse. He tries to study and become like a medical doctor, but is unable to fulfill his parents' dream of that. And it's kind of like how that affected like her. And I didn't know these issues were like prevalent in Manipur, or were once prevalent in Manipur. So it gave me like a really insightful view into that. Other than this, I also thought the ending story of like Sahana mentioned this at the beginning with the Pumdis. They're the floating islands in the lake. It was talking about how like certain school children, it was revolving around these school children that were from the Fundis and how they would go to school there. And it talked about this one girl who was super excited about getting new shoes. And she gets these new shoes, but when she goes to school, like she can see her teacher leaving, and it's kind of like all the students have like accepted it at this point. They're like, all the teachers leave here because they know they can't make a living here. And she throws her shoes into the lake as if to say, like, even though she was so excited to get them, it's kind of to say like, oh, what's the point of even staying here if I can't live? So I think those are such interesting points about like the locality, not just the geography of the place, but also like how people feel about living there, the sufferings that people go through living there. And like Sahana says, like reading books like this and getting a view into like the actual culture provides such an insight into who these people really are, and a very, very integral part of India. It like, again, it breaks that stereotype of what an Indian truly is.
Like it's not a monolith. There's like so many different moving parts which you can really like look into. And I think this book also provides like a great jumping off point if you're interested in Manipuri culture and you want to know like this like some specific topics which you would like to research. It's such a good jumping off point that you can do further research on and just get yourself more educated. So
exactly.
Highly recommend reading this book, and I really hope more books like this can be published in the future. So Thank you so
read
much
this
for
book.
writing this
Yes.
at Linthoi Chanu. And then
And it's not just learning about Manipuri culture, it's learning about Indian culture as a whole. So you need to read this.
Yeah.
It's a very good book. Highly recommend.
highly recommend. Please read this. We enjoyed reading this a lot. And thank you so much for watching.
Thank you for watching. Bye.